Anyway, let's get into our next spy comedy franchise that started more recently. Those are the Kingsman movies. Let's first of all get into Kingsman: The Secret Service. This was
Mhm.
directed by Matthew Vaughn, and it was based on a graphic novel franchise by Mark Miller. And obviously, you got Eggsy, played by Taron Egerton, who's recruited into the Kingsmen by Harry Hart, who's played by Colin Firth, and the rest is history. Yeah, so I saw this one in theaters like the same month that it came out, which was February 2015. I remember the trailers being super exciting, but the word of mouth was just so good. Like my theater, I remember you couldn't even find a seat because it was so packed, and it was like 2 weeks after it came out, and it was just really something. Like I just loved it. Like you said, the action was so unique. The editing was really special. The cast, everyone was so witty and charismatic. It was so visually appealing. The music choices were terrific, and I just wanted to watch it again right away, which I did as soon as it came out for the home release. And I showed it to a friend of mine, and he said it was awesome.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like it's one of those movies that for action movie fans, it's hard not to love. Um, Matthew Vaughn, he's so visionary. I think he's so singular on the control of how his movies look and feel. And I think Kingsman, the first one, is one of the best examples of that. What about you, AJ? You saw this a lot more recently than 2015, huh?
Yeah, I saw him last week. Yeah,
Last
so
week for the first
yeah,
time.
for the
Nice.
first time. I mean, cause like when Kingsman came out, I remember like the trailer coming out and seeing it, but I was in school, so I ain't really had no bread to go to the movies like that. So I was just deep into my Marvel bag. I was just watching everything that had to do with Marvel as far as like that's what I if I was going to the theaters, that's what I was going to go see type thing. So when it first came out, I wasn't like disinterested in it, but it wasn't like top of mind, like, oh I gotta go see it. And like nobody I knew went to go see it either. So it was just like it kind of just fell out the woodwork. But once you brought it up to me, it was like, yeah, we're gonna do a Argyle pod. You should watch Kingsman. I was like, yeah, it's about time I should watch that because I never got a chance to do it. So I was excited to watch all three. Um and I gotta say, like, first impression, I really liked the first one a lot. Just because it had like a certain type of humor. I feel like that's just like just the terms that they use and like slang that um I'm more I know more about it now, but like thinking about it to before, I just don't think it connected, you know. But with this movie, I think just like the coming of age story is always a fun thing to watch, and then just seeing Eggsy's background as far as like how he grew up and seeing like, oh dang, his dad was a real one. All right, well, like they're just gonna let him go for this whole time. It's kind of how I feel about how they did Naruto. I know it's anime, but it's like you got this secret service that got all this bread, but you're gonna watch my man struggle his whole life, and now you need him. Like, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things I like about Kingsman. As far as like the music, the editing. I think the editing was like it gave me like first person shooter vibes as far as like the
Yeah.
action scenes, and it was very like animated and just over the top, you know. And it's just it was a dope way to start the trilogy for sure.
I want to add on that a little bit while we're on the subject of Taron Egerton's performance,
Hmm.
because now he's, a Hollywood superstar, and this was the first reason to that. And I think he had such a natural charisma here, where he was
Hmm.
like this sort of like low life, using curse words all the time, but then he like in the last act of the movie he adopts this class, and he's super
Hmm.
cool, and I just think he was so lovable in that
Yeah,
movie. He was so
rooting
much
for him.
fun
Yeah.
because yeah, because like you said, he kind of came from nothing, even though his dad was a Kingsman. Um, but he had a humility to him. Like he looked
Hmm.
out for his mom a lot, and he, always a green flag. He looked out for the dog,
Yeah.
which, which is fun. But yeah, I think Taron Egerton was just wonderful. Colin Firth, I think this is also like, he's done a lot. I don't think he's really done many action movies because he's mostly either the serious movies like The King's Speech or the rom-coms like Bridget Jones and Love Actually.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Mark Strong is like a fave of mine in these first two.
Yeah.
Like him as Merlin, because he's done a lot of roles where he's like either a bad guy or a sidekick in these like witty action movies. But here, like down to the Scottish accent, like the whole like fucking spectacular, right? Like he is just, he's just a blast, and when he's just being a role model to Eggsy, he is so fantastic, and I absolutely love that. And you had some crazy people in this movie. You had Mark Hamill, Michael Caine, Samuel L. Jackson as the villain. I feel like he's played some villains in the past. But him with the lisp, him with his SD card, I just loved him as well.
It's the hat, man. The hat was throwing me. I was like, yo, remember, this 2015. This 2015 was back in the day. But I think I really enjoyed this cast. And I really think like as far as like Merlin, like my favorite moment was after the jump. Just because like you never really know. You know what I'm saying? And they put this into your brain. And once it was like, check your parachute. Boom. I was like, wow. I was not expecting. I was like, yo, I really thought it was just like it had to be him, But that's the thing. Like I love a good training arc. And from that to the first one with the underwater scene, which I thought was like, it looked crazy.
That was really cool.
And it's just like, the Kingsman, they was just doing that job. I don't know a better way to explain it. It just had me super hyped, like coming off of that. I was like, damn, I got 3 more of these. Then I saw the second one, and I was like, all right.
Yeah, and shout out Roxy, like justice for Roxy, because we'll get to that.
Oh my gosh,
we'll get to that. But I really loved her in the first movie, and she definitely earned her spot as the next Lancelot or whatever it was. Another person that I do want to shout out though is Sophia Boutella as Gazelle, because this is also the real breakout for her, and now she's really big.
Rebel Moon.
I love that final fight between Eggsy and Gazelle so much, like down to the song choice, down to the rhythm of it, down to the editing.
Yeah,
like you were talking about how this inspired your like editing styles, and I was like, I totally understand. But even just the sounds of like him getting like a metal plate to like protect himself from her things, and all the cartoonish stuff that she does, like slicing people in half. I really loved her character as far as sidekicks go or henchmen go.
Just dangerous.
The church scene. We can't ever forget the church scene.
Yeah. Oh, that's why it's number one. That's why it's number one. Because when I saw that, I was like, there's no way. I was like, how he gonna get out of there? And then I was like, dang, does he have something to protect himself? And then he just went off. And I found out like that was not even supposed to be in the movie. Like they shot it, but it was like up until like the last few days or whatever, they was like, man, we don't know if we should put this in here, because that was super graphic. But that had me like, bro, this song is real. Like that song was crazy.
And it's crazy. I remember being in the theater for that, and everyone was like, damn, because A, it's graphic, B, they edited it to look like one shot, and then the last moment, like you got all those crazy kills, like explosions, axes and shit, and then you have that ending moment where he's where he just like, everyone else is dead and he's just like looking on, he's like, oh, what have I done? Colin Firth plays it so well, especially when he's like, do y'all remember when he's like, I'm a Catholic whore or whatever, like he's trying to get the woman next to him to get up and piss her off, and then he just that. Oh my goodness!
I didn't get that.
Like,
I thought he would
have
just
a great day.
Yeah, I thought he was just like trying to be funny. Like I didn't get like he was trying to
He was
rile
just
her
trying to
up in
troll
that
her.
moment. Up until he actually started fighting, I was like, he's just gonna walk out. He'll be fine. Like I just did not believe it. But my thing about the church scene, I'm like, yo, where all the knives come from? Like they just had them on it in their
Yo,
pocket. Like the weapons was like out here like going crazy. So that was
was it?
another thing about that church. I was just like, yo, like you gotta just toss that up to like action movie, like, you know?
Hey, so how close are we? Do we think to the SD card thing being reality?
I mean, they
Oh,
put
and
it
of
in every
course,
movie now.
the explosion, the heads blowing. That was also a moment where watching it in the theater, everyone was like audibly reacting.
Yeah.
I'm sure you had a similar experience where everyone was. That's just what I love about Matthew Vaughn. He's just so audacious. He sort of pushes the limits a little visually. Where some might argue this was his last great movie so far, but I
Dang.
think it might even be his best.
Yeah.
And And to wrap up on this first movie, where do you guys just think it holds up now in terms of like modern action movies in general? Because for me, when it comes to rewatchability, when it comes to originality in the action scenes, I think Kingsman's always going to be up there, the first one.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I
it
agree.
really did.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the Kingsman, um, it really comes down to just like because I watched it at home. You know, y'all got to watch it in the actual theaters. So when something crazy happened, I got to pause it and just walk around like, yo, ain't no way that just happened, you know? And I have like a a a different experience, but I think the sentiment is still the same that this movie is really good. And as far as like action movies, I think it being like the first one and being like sort of like an origin story, not so much for the Kingsman, but for Eggsy, like I feel like that carries over more as far as like where it ranks amongst like the the other action movies because like the other historic franchises, like you kind of already knew what you were going to get into once you were doing it. And if you didn't read I just found out the Kingsman War book just now. So like if you didn't read the books, that's just like that's something free right there, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we get into the second one, Kingsman: The Golden Circle? This one was so successful, especially for an R-rated action movie.
Mhm.
Mind you, before even Deadpool, that they greenlit a sequel, brought it out 2 years later. And in this one, Poppy is a drug lord mastermind who
Yeah.
targets the Kingsmen, and now they have to join forces with the Statesmen, which
Mhm.
is I think is a really fun gimmick. So this one I also saw in theaters. I had to go opening day just because it was on my top 10 anticipated of that year. I think I even went with my grandpa, and he usually just falls asleep during movies. He's like, okay, I'll go for you or whatever. But he said he really liked this one. I don't even know what that says. But anyway, um, a
That's facts
lot of
though.
people are mixed on this one. It has a 50% on RT.
Mhm.
I got out of this movie and I really liked it. I was like, that was a really rewarding sequel. It's not as good as the first, but I had a great time and I just got what I wanted from it. I just thought it was still audacious. The action scenes were still creative. You had something new in it with the statesman doing some like American humor, and I mean, it's stupid, yeah, but I just thought it still brought back, in my opinion, everything that managed to be great about the first movie while expanding on it.
Nah, he was singing that
R.I.P.
song though. He was singing that
I was
song.
definitely surprised that they brought back Harry, and then in
Yes.
the same movie he was like he left us,
That
which was sad. I really Merlin was the goat.
that is the
What
reason
was that?
why it was I didn't like this thing. I'm gonna just say I liked it, but it was like it was mid for me, because like I think it had like when you're watching movies, especially when you watch them in theaters or just like trilogies like this, because I went in right after the first one, I think that definitely skewed as far as like how I feel about it. If I had a little bit of nostalgia, if it was like a little bit more time spaced into it, I might have had a different feeling like going into watching in theaters. But I do think the cast for this was great. I don't like how they did the original characters. I don't think they should have brought Harry back because he just made the. I feel like he made the story like slow down way more than it needed to, because once you figure out about the statesman, you're like, oh, there's a whole other like thing. So like let's learn about that now. And then it's like boom, Harry, oh, now we backtrack, especially when you don't got his memory. So
I
I
get that actually.
yeah, so when I was watching it,
Yeah.
I was just like, why'd they do that? Like why would that be the choice? And I really think it had to be the little meat scrambler thing. What is it called? Meat grinder. Yes. When
Yeah, that
he
was like their version of the church scene.
exactly. But instead of it being like gory and bloody and stuff like the church scene was, there was no blood. They went in and put his legs in there, and that was it. And I was like, oh, because I was just like, yo, so we're just not gonna take it there this time, So that's when like that was the first strike, because that happened like right in the beginning of the movie, and it was just like, oh, we're gonna establish, Julianne Moore as this drug lord. She's like, I'm gonna make you eat this burger and all that, and I'm gonna put you in this meat grinder. But nothing happens after that. So I was like, well, I guess I can't take you that seriously. I don't know. But, like that was the start of the fall for me for the second movie.
Look, I get that the story's nothing crazy. I'm not gonna defend
Mm-hmm.
like everything that happens. I'm not too much of a fan of Julianne Moore's villain here.
Yeah.
I think she's a little too annoying at times. Also, she has the whole plan to like genocide all drug users, pretty much,
Yeah.
which is a bit much. And then you have the whole president thing, which is pretty unnecessary, where Bruce
Mm-hmm.
Greenwood is the president, and I think Emily Watson was there as the chief of staff or something. Yeah, Emily Watson was in this movie, and it wasn't even in the trailers. But also, then you just have all the funny stuff. Like you have "Let's Go Crazy" by Prince in the opening scene, which I think is really fun, and just about all the action. And there's still a lot of humor that I think redeemed it for me. I mean, you had Elton John,
Yeah. I
which
love
like what
Elton
more could
John
you
in
ask
this.
for than having Elton John in a movie when he's hitting the bowling balls? He's like, "Fuck you, puppy!" Like I just really enjoy that.
Mm-hmm.
And Pedro Pascal also, I think, was a standout. This was one of the first big things that I saw him in, and his whole Southern accent. I think he was such a great character in this.
Yeah. That accent definitely got better for Last of Us.
I mean, at that point, I knew that Harry was going to be alive because the trailer. So I was like, okay, whatever, let's roll with this. Even though I could have, like you said, AJ, I could have done with him being dead after he got shot in the head by Samuel L. Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like, okay, I'll suspend my disbelief, but it's not like the most natural resurrection of a character we've had.
Yeah, I think that whole scene, I like it as far as like the world building aspect of it, just being because the statesmen, even though they weren't necessarily super aware of what was going on directly in that moment, was able to still pull up and just be like, oh, okay, we need to assess what's going on in this situation type thing. So it's like, as far as bringing legitimacy to them being like in control in the States, I think that's cool. But what it does for the story, it was just more so like, all right, I mean, I guess that makes sense. You got a little pillow that makes somebody heal, like from a brain tumor, or not brain tumor, but a bullet to the head. Like, I guess that makes sense, But it just like I was saying, like it's the story for me is very scattered, and it's very like, I feel like indecisive in what they was trying to do with this one, because you have
Obviously.
two different villains with the president and Poppy, who kind of play in the same role, but it's just like, I don't know, it's tricky. It's tricky.
I do think like Channing Tatum's also a bit underused in this one. even though the
Yeah.
movie already has, it's a little crowded. But I also just think the fact for me that it had that similar energy to the first one, where for me at least a lot of the humor worked and a lot of the action scenes worked. Like the first one's already so outlandish with the Valentine SD card and so on, that I was able to like suspend my disbelief for robot dogs and Poppy Land and all that stuff. Um, for me, it was still a really fun. It was a really fun sort of experience, especially watching it in a theater. But it's. I think the first one's a lot more pure, especially because you had that, like you said, that rise to glory for Eggsy and
Mm-hmm.
Taryn being so purely great in that first movie. But I do think a lot of the characters are still really charismatic in this one, and there's still a lot of like the action playing off the comedy or the editing, like the whole like ski lift, not ski lift, like the gondola scene, or they try
Mm-hmm.
to have their version of the church scene later on, which I think was fun with Pedro Pascal. Or like I said, anytime Elton John shows up in the action.
Yeah. Yeah. I liked when I think about just like the plot in general, I think Poppy's plan was really good as far as like to be a bad guy because it affected so many people, regardless of like, yes, that's mad genocidal type beat, but it was like everybody was impacted that we cared about, essentially, you know. And throughout this whole movie, you also got Eggsy and the princess's relationship that's happening, and like he's having issues with, troubles on the job. We got to do the job, but he's like, I don't want to, but it's like part of it. I'm let you know, like, so you can see them working through their relationship and getting to see their chemistry continue forward, just for it to all go kablooey. And it's just like, oh yeah, we're gonna get married. Like that's what kind of how I felt.
Did you guys like the whole thing with the princess? Because that was just like a sex joke at the end of the first movie, and
Yeah,
now here it's a whole thing. I enjoyed it, but I don't know.
they kind of forget about characters too, because like, what happened to his sister? You know what I'm saying? Like he had a whole sister. She wasn't in the end. She was nowhere to be found at the wedding. So,
Oh
um,
damn!
I was out just because I went
Justice
like
for JB also
right. So like I literally
for the
went
pug.
from um yep, and Brandon. I literally went from the first movie to the second movie, so like it was still like their relationship was still like fresh on my mind. I guess you could call it a relationship because like there was just like boom, like was a fling, but now we like this. So um it didn't really matter that much to me, but it was just like another thing added on to like Eggsy's character development as far as like him becoming a quote unquote man, But that just seemed like more of a back burner type thing.
Mhm. So should we get into the Kingsman with that, and then we'll after that finish with our ranking of the three?
That's cool with me.
Um, yeah. What did we think of this one? This one came out the most recently, 2021. I saw this one in theaters as well.
Off going from one to two, or going from Kingsman to Golden Circle to now the King's Man, I was just like, oh, they just do whatever they want to do now. Like, and I was like, all right, I'm kind of with it because it was more so like world building versus like more storyline. It's at least one more. It's at least one more.
You were
But
saying,
yeah, I was like, when I was watching it, I was like, okay, obviously, like this is the beginning of it, and none of the characters I know are going to be in it. So I was like, it's kind of just like a fresh take, and it's like another another beginning origin movie. So I usually like those more than sequels. So that's kind of like the direction I went with it. And then seeing the cast in it, I was like, okay, this should be cool. Like, you know, but I don't know. The three brothers plot had me hyped, but it was very predictable in the end. I will say that.
I was really excited for this movie, and I was really disappointed by it. Originally, I was like, "Oh, a Kingsman prequel about the origins in World War One, what?" And then the trailers came out, and I was like, "Oh, this seems like it could be a lot of fun." But mostly thanks to Matthew Vaughn directing. But I just didn't like it. I thought it was a mess. I thought tonally, um, I think it should have even taken itself less seriously, in my opinion, because you already have Rasputin, who's so exaggerated. They really play into this fact that he was like mythically almost unkillable in a
Yeah.
way. And they play into that, and that's a really good scene, the fight with Rasputin.
Hmm.
And then you obviously have Tom Hollander playing three different characters. Um, and so it was kind of, I think that idea of like making fun of the politics of war and then showing the Kingsman as like coming in and making things right. Um, like that idea is good, but I think the rest of it, first of all, the themes are really muddled. Like, if you look at it, the themes are kind of like this guy's a pacifist, but it's war, so you should kill
Hmm.
because the Kingsmen have to kill sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
it tried to be something thematically weighty, and we've seen stuff like Inglorious Bastards where it's like war, but we got a lot of carnage and it's not taking it seriously. So something like this is really doable.
Hmm.
But I just think tonally it was such a mess, and a lot of the a lot of the writing and the character development just wasn't good for me. I wish they had made Harris Dickinson more of the lead, but I really did not like what they ended up doing to his character because it kind of creates this really dull spot in the end of the second act of the movie that missed completely emotionally for me. But yeah,
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what it was. I liked it. I liked it, and it was like it. Think about it now, like all of them together. It is very, very different because it's like in a completely different time, and intelligence looks different back then than it does in the future. So, like for me, I guess it was the narrative that I enjoyed more as far as like them telling the story. But when I think about the characters and the dad and you know his rise and fall and like come back or whatever, I get what y'all saying, but I guess it's because I kind of feel like they're completely separate movies. So I switched. So it's like I guess it hits different in that way for me. But if I was going into it thinking like, oh, this is something like after seeing two, like if I was going into it thinking like I was gonna see something completely different, maybe I would have saw it as something different. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah, I really struggled with the structure of it as well because they have all this drama that's not interesting because it's them like talking about like the war and stuff in a really serious like war drama kind of way. Like, you're forgetting that you're Kingsman. You can still be like bright and funny. Like the fact that you have Rasputin the way that he is and all these world leaders the way that they're portrayed, they should have leaned more into that energy, like you said. But also the structure. Again, there's like that long build up to the really good action scene with Rasputin. Then
Hmm.
you have all this stuff like with the war that really didn't work for me. Then you have some stuff that tries to be really sad, and only then you get to like the really good climactic action scene. I think the there wasn't as good of a flow with the pace as well. It just felt like there were too many like long stops, but that's not even the problem. The problem is just that like the themes just missed the mark as well. And I will also say like again when there's action, he knows how to direct the action scenes. Like
Yeah.
it gets to be silly sometimes then, like even with the goat coming in or something.
Yeah.
And the music, I'll just shout out like Henry Jackman his music. I don't think he did the Kingsman, but in general, the themes of Kingsman I love.
Mm-hmm.
But just as a film, this one missed the mark for me. Didn't work.
I thought it was gonna go in a different direction. So like, I thought instead of the dad being the main character, I thought the son was gonna be the main character. We're gonna get to see him like come back from the war, type thing. And it's just like
Yeah.
when after he saved Cuz from the trench, made it back. Well, he didn't save him, but he tried to. Made it back to the trench and then like immediately gets taken out. I was like, well, there goes that plot line. I don't know what's gonna happen now. Like, you know? So I'm still expecting it to be another Eggsy situation where we get to see him grow into being the Kingsman, but they just kind of flip it and that's that. But I do get what y'all are saying now, like looking back at it, because it was just like, for me, I was since I was watching like back to back, everything was already still in my mind as far as like everything I done seen. So I didn't take it as serious as far as like, oh, this is something that needs to look like the first two movies. I was just looking at it like it was just like in its own kind of separate little world because it's so far in the past.
It's not even the look. It's more like the feel to me. And what you said, like with Harris Dickinson, I think he should have been the main character here. And then the way he was taken out was so stupid, and it just made this like really depressing spot in the film that like I was like, really, we're going this way, really, like, and so everything after that, just emotionally, was really weird because like Ray Fiennes deciding that like in order to be the man that his son wants him to be, he has to kill. It's like, oh, okay, that's the message that pacifists should kill because you have to stop World War I. I don't know. It felt like moments of a great Kingsman movie. And that's unfortunately it for me. Should we get into our ranking then of these three films?
Let's do it.
I feel like we'll be a bit different, but so one is I think like the purest, the best, like 9 out of 10. Two, I would say like 7.5 out of 10. That's next. And then three, I would give like 4 out of 10. So that's at the bottom for me.
Yeah. I think because of the way I got introduced to all of the movies and like watched them, my expectations weren't what y'all's were going into it. So like, and I think just watching them all like back to back probably not necessarily skewed my ranking, but like I gave the first one an 8 out of 10, and then I gave the second one a 7 out of 10, and then I gave the last one an 8 out of 10 again, because I feel like the first one and the second one, like I was looking all at them separately, like not necessarily connected, and I feel like the first one and the second one to me in the moment were better movies. Not so much as a Kingsman movie, but just like what I watched, I like that one better. But it's not necessarily by much, but that's just kind of where I landed with it.